Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner.
Tonight we're going to be talking about Monarch Programming, MK Ultra, and Beta Kitten Programming. Stick around. Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Tonight is October 12th, 2024, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, live on Cause Before Symptom. I am here to entertain you with more crappy news. That's all I got. I did say last night that, look, you guys can choose to accept a good world and accept that everyone's going to be okay because the Bible says so. We'll be fine. Or you can grab all of this information, harness it, and then snap one day, and that ain't good. So I thought tonight we would talk about Monarch Programming and how it works with mind control. In fact, all of you right now are being mind controlled. Yes, it's been going on ever since you were born. And thanks to cell towers, satellites, EMF stations that broadcast low electromagnetic frequencies, and the drugs they put in our water, they are able to get us to do what they want. This is why no one rebels. You sit back and you watch the country go to hell and wonder why no one does anything about it. Well, I'm telling you, the reason is because we are all programmed. Monarch Programming is a method of hard mind control used by numerous organizations for covert purposes. It is a continuation of Project MK Ultra, a mind control program developed by the CIA and tested on the military and civilians. The methods are astonishingly sadistic. Its entire purpose is to traumatize the victim, and the expected results are horrifying. The creation of a mind-controlled slave who can be triggered at any time to perform any action required by the handler. While mass media ignores this issue, over 2 million Americans have gone through the horrors of this program. This article looks at the origins of Monarch Programming and some of its methods and symbolism relating to satanic ritual abuse, which is where this actually came from. It goes back to Egypt, Mesopotamia, even back to the sons of Cain. Shout out to everyone who is here. Amanda, She Lexi, Edged, Texas Militia, Boofob, Boots is in the house, Spark at a Spleef. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now, Monarch Programming is a mind control technique comprised of elements of satanic ritual abuse and multiple personality disorder, which MPD is gone. Now they call it dissociated disorder. So that's out. But definitely it is multiple personality disorder because they create, through the programming, other personalities. It utilizes a combination of psychology, neuroscience, and occult rituals to create within the slaves an alter persona that can be triggered and programmed by the handlers. Monarch slaves are used by several organizations connected with the world elite in fields such as the military, sex slavery, and the entertainment industry. This article will look at the origins of Monarch programming, its techniques, and also its symbolism. The origins. Throughout the course of history, several accounts have been recorded describing rituals and practices resembling mind control. One of the earliest writings giving references to the use of occultism to manipulate the mind can be found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It is a compilation of rituals heavily studied by today's secret societies, which describes methods of torture and intimidation to create trauma, the use of potions or drugs, and the casting of spells, hypnotism, ultimately resulting in the total enslavement of the initiate. Other events ascribed to black magic, sorcery, demon possession, where the victim is animated by an outside force, are also ancestors of Monarch programming. It is, however, during the 20th century that mind control became a science in the modern sense of the term, where thousands of subjects have been systemically observed, documented, and experimented on. In fact, the U.S. government was sued because they did this, and they lost and paid reparations, but continued on doing it. One of the first methodical studies on trauma-based mind control were conducted by Joseph Mengele, a physician working in Nazi concentration camps. He initially gained notoriety for being one of the SS physicians who supervised the selection of arriving prisoners, determining who was to be killed and who was to become a forced laborer. However, he is mostly known for performing grisly human experiments on camp inmates, including children, for which the Mengele was called the Angel of Death. I've also heard him as the Doctor of Death as well. She Lexi says, I wouldn't have listened to you this long if you didn't mess up, James. I always mess up. Words get scrambled in my brain. That's why I'm not on your local news. Plus, I wouldn't degrade myself down to being part of Project Monarch or Mockingbird. No thanks. Mengele, the Angel of Death, is infamous for his sordid human experiments on concentration camp prisoners, especially on twins, a part of his work that is rarely mentioned. However, in his research on mind control, much of his research in this field was confiscated by the Allies, America and Russia, and is still classified to this day. Can you believe it? This Doctor of Death, the Angel of Death, got away with it. The dude's dead now, I'm assuming. I'm pretty sure he is. But man, this makes me want to have the keys to hell so I could go down there and torture this mofo. Dr. Green, or Dr. Joseph Mengele, or the Angel of Death, the most significant programmer, perhaps one could give him the title of Father of Monarch Programming, was Joseph Mengele, an ex-Nazi concentration camp doctor. Thousands of Monarch mind-controlled slaves in the U.S. had Dr. Green as their chief programmer. Why he chose green, don't know. Maybe because of green hell, which is on Earth as we speak. Dr. Joseph Mengele of Auschwitz, notoriety, was the principal developer of the trauma-based Monarch project and the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control programs. Mengele and approximately 5,000 other high-ranking Nazis were secretly moved into the United States and South America in the aftermath of World War II in an operation designated Paperclip. I've talked about this many times. The Nazis continued their work in developing mind control and rocketry technology in secret underground military bases. The only thing we were told about was the rocketry work with former Nazi star celebrity like Wernher von Braun. The killers, torturers, and mutilators of the innocent human beings were kept discreetly out of sight, but busy in U.S. underground military facilities, which gradually became home to thousands upon thousands of kidnapped American children snapped off the streets, about 1 million per year, and placed into iron bar cages stacked from floor to ceiling as part of the training. These children would be used to further refine and perfect Mengelle's mind control technologies. Certain selected children, at least the ones who survived the training, would become future mind-controlled slaves who would be used for thousands of different jobs, ranging anywhere from sexual slavery to assassinations. A substantial portion of these children, who were considered expendable, were intentionally slaughtered in front of and by the other children in order to traumatize the selected trainee into total compliance and submission. It's sick. Mengelle's research served as a basis for the covert, illegal CIA human research program named MKUltra. Now, Project MKUltra ran from the early 1950s to at least the late 1960s, using American and Canadian citizens as its test subjects. The published evidence indicates that Project MKUltra involved the use of many methodologies to manipulate individual mental states and alter brain functions, including the surreptitious administration of drugs and other chemicals, sensory deprivation, isolation, and verbal and physical abuse. The most publicized experiments conducted by MKUltra involved the administration of LSD on unwitting human subjects, including CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, prostitutes, mentally ill patients, and members of the general public in order to study their reactions. However, the scope of MKUltra does not, however, stop. Experiments involving violent electroshocks, physical and mental torture, and abuse were used in a systemic manner on many subjects, including children. Although the admitted goals of the projects were to develop torture and interrogation methods to use on the country's enemies, some historians asserted that the project aimed to create Manchurian candidates, programmed to perform various acts such as assassinations and other covert missions. I also believe that presidents like Obama have been Manchurian candidates, have gone through the Monarch Programming, and have been placed into high positions because they are in full control by the elite. MKUltra was brought to light by various commissions in the 1970s, including the Rockefeller Commission of 1975. Although it is claimed that the CIA stopped such experiments after these commissions, some whistleblowers have come forth stating that the project simply went underground, and Monarch Programming has become the classified successor of MKUltra. I believe this because there are thousands of whistleblowers on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, all over social media. If you're looking and paying attention, they talk about being pulled away from society, snatched, placed underground, put in a cage, and the whole process starts. This has been going on since the 50s. And MKUltra ultimately got sued. They lost. So they went underground. And I believe they made separate private organizations with black budgets in order to continue MK Ultra. In fact, it is so widespread that it's not just 2 million people who have been programmed. It's in the hundreds of millions. The most incriminating statement to date made by a government official as to the possible existence of Project Monarch was extracted by Anton Chaikin, a writer for the publication The New Federalist. When former CIA Director William Colby was asked directly, "What about Monarch?" he replied angrily and ambiguously, "We stopped that between the late 60s and the early 70s. Although there has never been any official admittance of the existence of Monarch programming, prominent researchers have documented the systemic use of trauma on subjects for mind control purposes. Some survivors, with the help of dedicated therapists, were able to deprogram themselves to then go on to record and disclose the horrifying details of their ordeal." Unbelievable. Monarch slaves are mainly used by organizations to carry out operations using patsies, trained to perform specific tasks, who do not question orders, who do not remember their actions, and, if discovered, who automatically commit suicide. How convenient. They are the perfect scapegoats for high-profile assassinations. You can see Sirhan and find out all about high-profile assassinations. The idea candidates for prostitution, slavery, and private movie productions. They are also the perfect puppet performers for the entertainment industry. I believe people like Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, other high-performing actors and actresses are MK Ultra. In fact, Angelina Jolie described going to the rituals and drinking blood in one of her videos that leaked to the public. What I can say now is that I believe that ritual abuse programming is widespread and systematic, is very organized from highly esoteric information, which is published nowhere, has not been on any book or talk show, that we have found it all around this country and at least one foreign country. But I would argue that it is everywhere, not just in the United States. In fact, I can prove that Monarch Programming has been around since the sons of Cain, because they carved it on the walls and on poles. Not concrete, but I don't know what they made the stone pillars with, but they're carved in them. And I'll explain that later. People say, what's the purpose of this? Well, my best guess is that the purpose of it is that they want an army of Manchurian candidates, tens of thousands of mental robots who will do prostitution, will do movies, smuggle narcotics, engage in international arms smuggling, all sorts of very lucrative things, and do their bidding, and eventually the megalomaniacs at the top believe they'll create a satanic order that will rule the world. You know, the New World Order that I've been talking about for years. Monarch programmers, the actual programmers, cause intense trauma to subjects through the use of electroshock, torture, abuse, and mind games in order to force them to disassociate from reality. It's a natural response in some people when they are faced with unbearable pain. The subject's ability to disassociate or create an alter is a major requirement, and it is apparently most readily found in children that come from families with multiple generations of abuse. Mental dissociation enables the handlers to create walled-off personas in the subject's psyche, which can then be programmed and triggered at will. So, for example, when they get traumatized, the person can't handle it, so they create an alter person that's bigger and stronger than them. And they're the ones that take the pain for them. And the pain they go through is beyond anything you could ever imagine. The things that they do to the children is not just horrific and gory and a crime, but there's no word for doing these things to children. It is absolutely worse than anything you could ever do to a human being, and they do it. In fact, even Jesus said, "Woe to those who cause harm to children. It would be better that they were not even born." Trauma-based mind control programming can be defined as systemic torture that blocks the victim's capacity for conscious processing through pain, terror, drugs, illusion, sensory deprivation, sensory overstimulation, oxygen deprivation, cold, heat, spinning, brain stimulation, and often near death. And then employs suggestion and or classical and operant conditioning, consisting with well-established behavioral modification principles to implant thoughts, directives, and perceptions in the unconscious mind, often in newly formed trauma-induced dissociated identities that force the victim to do, feel, think, or perceive things for the purpose of the programmer. The objective is for the victim to follow directives with no conscious awareness, including execution of acts in clear violation of the victim's moral principles, spiritual convictions, and volition. Back in the 60s, they made it so popular that a person could pick up the phone and the person on the other line of the phone could say a phrase and it would wake up the alter person. And the phrase, they know exactly what to do, and they could go and assassinate someone. And then when another phrase is told to them after the job is done, they will have no memory or recollection of doing the crime. It is the perfect way of committing crime without doing it yourself. And the most wicked thing one could do to another human being, especially children. I don't feel sorry or any empathy or apathy towards the actual programmers who do this to children. I know that God says to love your neighbor, but if that's my neighbor, I have a problem with forgiving that one. Because they know what they're doing. They know it's wrong. And yes, Amanda mentioned P. Diddy. This is a part of that program. They will take a person who has no talent, like P. Diddy, make them popular by introducing them to all their other Monarch kittens, and use them to blackmail others to get what they want, to control the people and the industry. It's sick. Now, Jeffrey Epstein was also a part of that, but on a much major scale, going after high-end business people instead of celebrities. His job was to blackmail sheiks, princes, kings, royalty, CEOs, presidents, vice presidents. And what has been exposed is every industry, including the political genre, it's everywhere. It's in everything. Do not assume that large Fortune 500 companies are not using this on their own employees. Installation of mind control programming relies on the victim's capacity to disassociate, which permits the creation of a new walled-off personality to hold and hide programming. Already, disassociative children are prime candidates for programming. Monarch mind control is covertly used by various groups and organizations for various purposes. According to Fritz Springmeier, who is an author who wrote the 13 Illuminated Bloodlines and many other books about the occult, says that these groups are known as the network and form the backbone of the New World Order. Now, the origins of the name. This is important because you will find many people who have tattoos of butterflies. Monarch mind control is named after the monarch butterfly, an insect who begins its life as a worm, representing undeveloped potential, and, after a period of cocooning or programming, is reborn as a beautiful butterfly, the monarch slave. Some characteristics specific to the monarch butterfly are also applicable to mind control. In fact, there was a lady I knew, didn't know her very well, but had conversations with her from time to time. And she had a butterfly right here. And me being the open person I am, I go, is that a monarch butterfly? And I could see one of her eyes started to twitch. I knew right then she's been programmed. She's been in this situation. And it was like her altar was getting ready to show up to save her from such a question. It's real, folks. It's everywhere. It's in every city. One of the primary reasons that the Monarch mind control programming was named Monarch Programming was because of the monarch butterfly. The butterfly learns where it was born, or its roots, and it passes this knowledge via genetics onto its offspring from generation to generation. This was one of the key animals that tipped scientists off that knowledge can be passed genetically. The Monarch program is based upon Illuminati and Nazi goals to create a master race, in part through genetics, like Bill Gates. If knowledge can be passed genetically, which it is, then it is important that parents be found that can pass the correct knowledge onto those victims selected for the Monarch mind control. When a person is undergoing trauma induced by electroshock, a feeling of light-headedness is evident, as if one is floating or fluttering like a butterfly. There is also a symbolic representation pertaining to the transformation and metamorphosis of this beautiful insect from a caterpillar to cocoon or dormancy to inactivity to a butterfly or a new creation, which will return to its point of origin. Such is the migratory pattern that makes the species unique. The method. The victim and survivor is called a slave. And they're called that by their programmer and handler, who in turn is perceived as master or God. About 75% are female, meaning 2/3, since they possess a higher tolerance for pain and tend to disassociate more easily than males. Monarch handlers seek to compartmentalization of their subject's psyche in multiple and separate alter personas using trauma to cause disassociation. Here is a partial list of the forms of torture. Number 1, abuse and torture. Number 2, confinement in boxes, cages, coffins, etc., or burial, often with an opening or air tube for oxygen. Restraint with ropes, chains, cuffs, and the like. Near drowning, meaning waterboarding and holding their head underwater. Extremes of heat and cold, including submersion in ice water and burning chemicals. Skinning. Only top layers of the skin are removed in victims intended to survive. Spinning. Well, they'll put them in chambers and spin them as fast as they possibly go to get them to disassociate. Blinding light. Electric shock. Forced shock. Forced ingestion of offensive body fluids and matter, such as blood, urine, feces, flesh. They would force children to do this, eat it. They are hung in painful positions or upside down for very long periods of time. They deprive them of food and water where they become hungry and thirsty. They deprive them of sleep. They use compression with weight devices. They use sensory deprivation. Drugs are used to create illusions, confusion, and amnesia, often given by injection or intravenously. Injection or intravenous toxic chemicals to create pain or illness, including chemotherapy agents. Their limbs are pulled or dislocated. Applications of snakes, spiders, maggots, rats, and other animals to induce fear and disgust. Near-death experiences, commonly with asphyxiation by choking or drowning with immediate resuscitation. They're forced to perform or witness abuse, torture, and sacrifice of people and animals, usually with knives. Forced participation in slavery. Abuse to become pregnant. The fetus is then aborted for ritual use, or the baby is taken for sacrifice or enslavement, or sometimes eaten. Spiritual abuse to cause victims to feel possession, harassed and controlled internally by spirits or demons. Desecration of Judeo-Christian beliefs and forms of worship dedicated to Satan and other deities. Abuse and illusion to convince victims that God is evil, such as convincing a child that God has abused them. Surgery to torture, experiment, or cause the perception of physical or spiritual bombs or implants. Harm or threats of harm to family, friends, loved ones, pets, and other victims to force compliance. Use of illusion and virtual reality to confuse and create non-credible disclosure. All of this is real. In fact, if you are in that world, you would have a handbook on exactly what to do and follow the guidebook. meaning they have documented this and perfected it to where it's an organization, well-running machine. There are people who it's their job to move the victim from one cage to the other. It's also their job to move them from the cages to the experimental rooms, while another one has a job of performing one of the 30 that I just mentioned. It's not just something you can do with just one person. It takes a team of people to traumatize hundreds of people that are located underground and far away from prying eyes. And yes, this is a lot for people. And it is hard to listen to this. But if I don't tell the truth, who will? This is a common staple in our world that is not new. They've been doing it since the Egyptians to the Mesopotamians, even in the land of Cain. Mind control is the number one thing on the mind of all elite. That's what they're in. That's what they do. It is in their bones and their blood, and they will not stop. The basis for the success of the Monarch mind control programming is that different personalities or personality parts, called alters, can be created who do not know each other, but who can take the body at different times. The amnesia walls that are built by traumas form a protective shield of secrecy that protects the abusers from being found out and prevents the front personalities who hold the body, much of the time, to know how their system of alters is being used. Meaning they break them up into dozens of people. The shield of secrecy allows cult members to live and work around other people and remain totally undetected, especially at these Freemason lodges. You won't know because the ones that do it don't tell anybody. And they have control of the sheriff through mind control, blackmail, you name it. Not all sheriffs, but the majority. And it's really easy to get a sheriff compromised. Send one of your sex kitten mind-controlled slaves that's beautiful and seduce the sheriff, drug him up, videotape the whole thing. Now you've got him or her. Sex has been used for control since the beginning of time. Now, the front altars can be wonderful Christians, and the deeper altars can be the worst type of satanic monsters imaginable. A Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde effect. I met one. This guy could write the most beautiful Christian music I've ever heard. He was smart, divorced, had kids. And that's it. And then all of a sudden, well, his Jekyll or Hyde came out. And he was doing things behind my back that I didn't even know, which was doing meth, stealing things from job sites and stealing other people's ideas. We tried a intervention on him, tried to cast demons out. But how do you cast demons out of 15 or 20 different altars? Each altar has their own personality with their own demons. A great deal is at stake in maintaining the secrecy of the intelligence agencies or the occult group which is controlling the slave. The success rate of this type of programming is high, but when it fails, the failures are discarded through death or used as they just went crazy. Case in point, Britney Spears. She broke down, shaved her head, went psycho because the real Britney took over. Case in point, Amanda Bynes. Thank you, Lexi. Amanda Bynes was molested by the Nickelodeon guy, and he still is denying he touched them. And this Nickelodeon guy, I forgot his name, but he is a predator. I don't think he's a Monarch programmer, but he definitely is or was the handler of these girls on his shows. Each trauma and torture serves a purpose. A great deal of experimentation and research went into finding out what can and can't be done. Charts, books, PowerPoint presentations, all of that were made showing how much torture a given body weight at a given age can handle without death. And it's happening right under your feet. Every city is connected to the underworld, where the real bad people go to do things like this. Due to the severe trauma induced through ECT, abuse and other methods, the mind splits off into alternative personalities from the core. Formally referred to as multiple personality disorder, it is presently recognized as dissociative identity disorder and is the basis for Monarch Programming. Further conditioning of the victim's mind is enhanced through hypnotism, double bind coercion, pleasure pain reversals, food, water, sleep, and sensory deprivation, along with various drugs which alter certain cerebral functions. Disassociation is thus achieved by traumatizing the subject using systemic abuse and using terrifying occult rituals. Once a split in the core personality occurs, an internal world can be created and alter personas can be programmed using tools such as music, movies, especially Disney productions, and fairy tales. These visual and audio aids enhance the programming process using images, symbols, meanings, and concepts. In fact, the movie Splice, which created the Beast that was inside of a person, and all of the alters of this MK Ultra person were trying to keep the beast away. And when the beast came out, it had uncanny abilities to and strength that surpasses human understanding. And yet this is exactly what the military was using MK Ultra and Monarch Programming to achieve, is the super soldier. By creating alters and convincing the person they have a beast in them that is capable of bending iron, ripping car doors off, lifting weights that is unachievable from weight ratio to weight ratio. But yet they're able to do it because they were convinced that they are a beast. Created alters can then be accessed using trigger words or symbols programmed into the subject's psyche by the handler. Some of the most common internal images seen by mind control slaves are trees, Kabbalistic tree of life, infinity loops, ancient symbols and letters, spider webs, mirrors, glass shattering, masks, castles, mazes, demons, butterflies, hourglasses, clocks, and robots. All of the things that are in children's cartoons. Alice in Wonderland. That's all about Monarch butterfly programming. These symbols are commonly inserted in popular culture, movies, and videos for two reasons: to desensitize the majority of the population using subliminals and neuro-linguistic programming, and to deliberately construct specific triggers and keys for base programming of highly impressionable Monarch children. Now, the Monarch children are those that are online and are your social justice warriors. They're programmed to go after people on purpose to disrupt harmony. To be that one person who thinks they're standing up for what's right, but are doing it all the wrong ways. By pouting, screaming, by assuming they have more rights to do the verbal it's not pouting. It's the I'm trying to find the word. Redirecting and not focusing on the other person's point of view. Basically, virtue signaling, but in turn, creating a mess. We've seen people get arrested and like on cops and all of that, and they absolutely go crazy. They start screaming, so out of control, start peeing themselves on purpose. Instead of just accepting what's happening and just move on and get a lawyer, they absolutely go insane. These are not just typical people. These are programmed people. Chameleons would change colors. I'm talking about the animal, the I think it's the animal chameleons. They would change color to deter their prey away as them being something not good to eat. I believe when people on their outside appearance go absolutely to the extremes, like changing their hair to 17 different colors, wearing clothing that doesn't really fit in society, I believe those are the people that are victims of Monarch programming. Because they don't have the tools to just be in society. And to function in society, they have to make a statement. What's up, Chew Strings? Long time. Yeah, Catcher of the Rye was a big MK Ultra book. It takes the reader and it programs the reader into accepting perversion. You can go look it up on Masters Mayhan. Talks all about Catcher in the Rye. The author uses phrases and words to nonchalantly make you think of things that you'd never thought of before and make it think like it's okay. Believe it or not, books can program you. These symbols that they place are commonly inserted in popular culture through neuro-linguistic programming deliberately to construct specific triggers and the keys for base programming of the highly impressionable Monarch children, the ones that make the most noise in society. Some of the movies used in Monarch programming include The Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland, Pinocchio, which the men in Pinocchio were taking boys to an island. The boys that were making too much of a mess, the boys that were rebellious. And the men were taking the boys to an island called Pleasure Island. They are slowly getting you to accept the idea that it's okay for an adult to take children to an island by themselves. Sleeping Beauty, too, is another one. The movie Wizard of Oz is used by Monarch handlers to program their slaves. Symbols and meanings in the movie become triggers in the slave's mind, enabling easy access to the slave's mind by the handler. In popular culture, veiled references to Monarch programming often use analogies to The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, like in The Matrix, Follow the White Rabbit. In each case, the slave is given a particular interpretation of the movie's storyline in order to enhance programming. For example, a slave watching The Wizard of Oz is taught that somewhere over the rainbow is the happy place. Dissociative trauma slaves must go to in order to escape the unbearable pain being inflicted upon them. Using the movie, programmers encourage slaves to go over the rainbow and disassociate, effectively separating their minds from their bodies. As mentioned before, the hypnotist will find children easier to hypnotize if they know how to do it with small children. One method that is effective is to say to the small children, imagine you are watching a favorite television show. This is why the Disney movies and other shows are so important to the programmers. They are the perfect hypnotic tool to get the child's mind to disassociate in the right direction. The programmers have been using movies since almost day one to help children learn the hypnotic scripts. For children, they need to be part of the hypnotic process. If the hypnotist allows the child to make up its own imagery, the hypnotic suggestions will be stronger. Rather than telling the child the color of a dog, the programmer can ask the child, This is where the book and films shown the child assisted them in steering their minds in the right direction. If the hypnotist talks to a child, he must take extra precaution not to change the tone of his voice and to have smooth transitions. Most of the Disney films are used for programming purposes. Some of them are specifically designed for mind control. I believe that was Fritz Springmeier. There are levels of Monarch programming. The levels identify the slave's functions and are named after the electroencephalography, or EEG, brainwaves associated with them. There is alpha programming, beta programming, delta programming, theta programming, monarch programming, electroshock torture. Alpha programming, regarded as general or regular programming, is within the base control personality. It characterized by extremely pronounced memory retention, extremely useful for actors in remembering their lines, along with substantially increased physical strength and visual acuity. Alpha programming is accomplished through deliberately subdividing the victim's personality, which, in essence, causes a left brain, right brain division, allowing for a programmed union of left and right through neuron pathway simulation or stimulation. There is beta programming, which is referred to sexual programming or slaves. This programming eliminates all learned moral convictions and stimulates the primitive instinct devoid of inhibitions. Cat alters may come out at this level. Known as kitten programming, it is the most visible kind of programming, as some female celebrities, models, actresses, and singers have been subjected to this kind of programming. In popular culture, clothing with feline prints often denote kitten programming. In fact, some of the people who have been programmed, they keep kittens and will hoard kittens on purpose to keep them safe from the handlers, because they use the kitten throughout their programming, and they want to save those kittens that they deliberately kill in front of them. So that's why there are people who have 120 cats. People don't understand why, and they're dying, and they're having kids, and there's urine and feces everywhere, and they don't understand why people could live in such a filth environment. But they have been through major beta programming. And this is the only thing that keeps them away from their handlers. They're protecting themselves by living in filth. There's also delta programming, which is known as killer programming, and was originally developed for training special agents or elite soldiers, like the Delta Force, like the 1st Earth Battalion, like the Mossad, CIA, you name it. And they're used for covert operations. Optimal adrenal output and controlled aggression is evident. Subjects are devoid of fear and very systemic in carrying out their assignment. Self-destruct or suicide instructions are layered in at this level. I've met many Delta-programmed people. I've met many Beta-programmed people. You won't know it unless you know all of this stuff. And you won't know it unless you watch and monitor how people behave. There are some people who were in the army and or military, and then they came out and they're absolutely different and on the verge of suicide. It's because they have been programmed. Not all, but a lot. To go in and do those tasks for the bankers. There's also theta programming, which is considered to be psychic programming. Bloodliners, those coming from multi-generated or generational satanic families, were determined to exhibit a greater propensity for having telepathic abilities than did non-bloodliners. Due to its evident limitations, however, various forms of electronic mind control systems were developed and introduced, namely biomedical human telemetry devices like brain implants, etc. Also directed energy lasers using microwaves and or electromagnetics. It is reported these are used in conjunction with highly advanced computers and sophisticated satellite tracking systems. So they convince their programmed individual that they are psychic, and they use highly advanced satellite and computers and directed energy lasers, etc., to help their psychic abilities improve. And then the Monarch Programming detection. A common real-world physical side effect from the electroshock torture victims undergo is one of their eyelids will exhibit visible signs of slight droopiness, usually in the their left eye. In fact, when I talk to people, I always look in their right eye, their left, but when I look at them, I look in their right eye. I always do. I don't know why. It's just something I do. And it's because the other eye has been programmed. The one eye, I'm looking at the real person. And I can totally tell if the person is demonically possessed or programmed or none of the above. Most Hollywood stars who have undergone this trauma, Monarch Programming, or electroshock torture therapy, or torture, where their eyelids will exhibit visible signs of slight droopiness. They vary in degrees in eyelid droopiness in both men and women. Some victims do not display this eyelid issue at all. But the older the victim gets, the more pronounced the result is, presumably due to the lack of elasticity in their skin. It is common practice for Monarch slaves to have their programming reinstalled and updated as they get older, or when their programming breaks down, like Britney Spears in 2007. Multiple sessions of electroshock torture over the years to create new alters is the likely cause for the eyelid issue. Think of some of those actors that have those droopy eyes. Electroshock torture and the dark reality of modern society. When a slave is taken to an impromptu programming site, a hypnotic drug is injected into them for a quick induction, while a metal band is put around their head and a current of 100,000 volts will be run through for, say, 5 seconds into their heads. This will cause the body to shake, the eyes to close, sweat to pour out of the body, etc. The hands are tied down with restraints. Sometimes the mouth is gagged so that the tongue doesn't protrude or get bit. After embedding the hypnotic commands deep into the mind, the programmers might adjust the automatic timer on the equipment and give the victim another blast of voltage for 10 seconds. The person's body will shake and quiver for a while after this. They may dribble and spit, but finally the person will be brought out of their hypnotic trance, instructed not to remember anything and to feel happy and sent on their way, kind of like Kanye West. When he started to break his programming, they took him and put him in a mental asylum and gave him shock therapy, and he came back out fine for a while, and then he started flipping out again. So that didn't work. So basically, they're now trying to discredit him and go after his money by suing him. His handler was his wife, Kim Kardashian. She wasn't able to keep him under control. They weren't married because they loved each other. She didn't love him. She was told to marry him to keep an eye on him. She's a witch. Hollywood and celebrity victims, droopy eyelid, lazy eye, Carrie Ann Moss from the Matrix trilogy. You know Trinity? In one example of a Hollywood star who clearly displays visible droopiness in her left eye. As seen in the screenshot above from The Matrix Reloaded, when combined with the Project Monarch symbolism connected with her character across the Matrix and The Matrix Reloaded, smashing headfirst through glass on multiple occasions. It is a sad thing to confirm, but this wonderful actress has undoubtedly undergone this horrific form of torture during her time in Hollywood, with the visible scars being the droopiness of her left eyelid. Careful observation of an individual's eyelids is a potential method of determining if the person has undergone this form of trauma-based mind control. You will be surprised how widespread the droopy eyelid or lazy left eye epidemic actually is in modern society. In fact, they tell you they're doing it like through pop artists like Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls, who wrote that song. One of the girls, her name is Left Eye. They're telling you that they're programmed. They're telling you. They sing about it. I forgot their name of the band because I don't care about them much. It is difficult to remain objective when describing the horrors endured by monarch slaves. The extreme violence, the abuse, the mental torture, and sadistic games inflicted on victims by notable scientists and high-level officials prove the existence of a true dark side in the powers that be. Despite the revelations, the documents, and the whistleblowers a great majority of the population ignores, dismisses, or avoids the issue altogether. Over 2 million Americans have been programmed by trauma mind control since 1947, and the CIA publicly admitted its mind control project in 1970. Yes, thank you, Spark Jive. It was TLC. Tender Loving Control. Movies such as The Manchurian Candidate have directly referred to the subject, even depicting actual techniques such as electroshock, the use of trigger words, and microchip implementation. Several public figures we see on our television and movie screens are mind-controlled slaves. Famous people such as Candy Jones, Celia Imrie, and Sirhan Sirhan have gone on record and disclosed their mind control experiences. And yet the general public claims that it cannot exist. I beg to differ. It's real. Yeah, she passed because the Left Eye, the singer in TLC, they killed her because she broke programming. The research and the funds invested in Project Monarch do not, however, only apply to mind control slaves. Many of the programming techniques perfected in these experiments are applied on a mass scale through mass media. Mainstream news, movies, music videos, advertisements, and television shows are conceived using the most advanced data on human behavior ever compiled. A lot of this comes from Monarch Programming. And 2 million people have undergone this program just via the military alone. There is no telling how many private organizations that have done the same and what those numbers are. I claim hundreds of millions. Why? Because it works. The Phoenicians and Egyptians used it because it is mentioned in the Book of the Dead. This means all countries, societies, and possibly companies traffic humans and mind control them for nefarious purposes. I do believe Trump getting the government involved in human trafficking is the equivalent of Reagan and the war on drugs. Instead of stopping it, they took it over for profit, as this was proven many times over that the CIA, along with the Air Force, is a legalized drug fucking operation. The proof is drugs haven't gone anywhere. In fact, its use has increased, and so has the potency. Ronald Reagan was an MK Ultra victim. I also believe this is the main reasons for tunnels and cities underground. There is an insanely large, organized operation using tax-paying funds to program trafficked humans to do the will of their masters. The CIA and military efforts in mimicking Russia's mind control techniques that they perfected have become mainstream, and the public is unaware their entertainment personalities that they put their full trust in are victims of mind control. How do I know they exist? Well, it's what I would do to control the masses. Mind control is found in ancient carvings from Mesopotamia and Egypt in the form of a pine cone. The two-faced leader, or the leader with the Egyptian with the bird head, it's got a pine cone in its hand, pointing it towards the people, and a purse in his other hand. The two-faced leader points the pine cone to the public, symbolizing they have control of their pineal gland. And the purse represents the wealth that they took from them. And they put it on carvings on all of their walls, all of their buildings, saying, people are stupid because we've got them. The pine cone represents the pineal gland because your pineal gland looks exactly like a pine cone. The purse represents the money that they steal from them all the time because they are controlling their mind. Now, the Egyptians and the Phoenicians and the Mesopotamians and the Canaanites, they all used drugs to control the people. Toth, right. But I'm telling you, we've gone a little bit ahead of that, and now we're using drugs and technology. And believe me, how do you know your thoughts are your own? They told us then and are telling us now through logos and symbolism. The all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid represents the ancient god Horus. And he's back and oversees 95% of all the world's currency through the US dollar. It's the same concept as the ancient civilizations did. And as the people worship the sun, we are told there is nothing new underneath it. The people never rebel because they are mind controlled. Back then, they used drugs and religion. Now we use drugs and electronics. And you are being mind controlled right now. Instead of a pine cone actually pointing at you, the two-faced leader actually is pointing at you a cell phone.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
If you're looking for a publication that delivers honest takes and critical insights into the issues of our day, then look no further than The Flame Paper. The Flame Paper is written for the people, by the people, who aren't afraid to challenge a mainstream narrative, be it healthcare, voter fraud, political correctness, or even the one world government. The Flame is full of timely articles, reports, and expert advice written by freedom-loving, truth-telling experts, journalists, and concerned citizens. To subscribe, go to theflameusa.com.
This has been Cosby for Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. No, Lexia was not agreeing with Toth. I was basically saying, yes, it is Toth, because Shoestring said, that's Toth. Toth was the one pointing the pine cone and holding the purse. No, I don't agree with that religion at all. Go to jamescarner.com and sign up for my newsletter. Thanks, Shoestrings. I appreciate that. Elite Potion is my product. Go to elitepotion.com and save your life from chemtrails and from parasites. My product will remove all of that. And you can help support me and actually will live longer if you take my product. And do me a favor, if you guys could just love your neighbor, okay? We'll all have a happier life if we all could just love our neighbors. See you tomorrow.